Welcome to our third and final session of Liturgical Gems of the High Holy Days, where, as I've said, we're trying to pack all of the themes and the prayers and the highlights of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur into a brief 1-hour class. We spent the first two classes focusing on the high holidays as a whole, and today we're going to be celebrating and discussing and reviewing and appreciating the grandeur of Yom Kippur, our Day of Atonement, the holiest day on the Jewish calendar. With that, Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. As we discussed in previous classes, especially through the prayer Unatan Tokef, we have a vision of a trial. We have a vision of us being in a courtroom, and God is sitting there as judge, as lawyer, as jury, and who's on trial? All of us. And what is the evidence that's being presented? The Sefer HaZichronot, right? The book of remembrances. All of our actions, all of our thoughts, all of our lives being put on full display and being on trial in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He. So we have Rosh Hashanah when the trial begins, the 10 days of repentance when we can work on our actions to hopefully sway the verdict in one direction or another. And this is not necessarily for everyone who has, maybe not, is firmly in one category. The swaying of the direction is actually for those who are, quote unquote, on the fence in God's eyes. So it's not necessarily that everything gets changed in our tradition between the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, the 10 days of repentance, but for those who are Beinenu in the middle, the 10 days of repentance hold extra special meaning. And Yom Kippur, Hine Yom Hadin. It is verdict day. So as I like to do, let's take a look at the sources from the Torah, talking about the holiday of Yom Kippur, and the text specifically of how it is introduced to us. Okay, so we have, he who burned them, here it is, verse 29. This shall be to you a law for all time. In the 7th month, remember we talked about the 7th month starting with the month of Nisan. When we are celebrating the Exodus from Egypt, the 7th month after Nisan is going to be Tishrei. In the 7th month, on the 10th day of the month, you shall practice self-denial. Initem et nafshotechem. You shall do no matter of work, neither the citizen nor the alien who resides among you. For on this day, atonement shall be made for you to cleanse you of all of your sins, and you shall be clean before the Lord. Shabbat, Shabbaton, he. The word Shabbat, day of rest. Shabbat, Shabbaton, the Sabbath of Sabbaths. Complete rest for you, and you shall practice self-denial. It is a law for all time. So already here, we're getting a lot of the themes of Yom Kippur. Atonement for our sins, coming before God, initem et nafshotechem, to deny our bodies some of the regular pleasures in life, okay? No showering, no wearing of leather garments, no marital relations, no eating, no drinking, praying all day. Some of the themes, and Shabbat, Shabbaton, we'll talk about this too in a little bit. The next text from Leviticus 23. Ach be'asor lachodesh hashvi hazeh yom hakippurim hu mikra kodesh yeh lachem v'initem et nafshotechem v'hikrabtem isha ishet ladonai. Mark the 10th day of the 7th month. It is the day of atonement. It shall be a sacred occasion for you. You shall practice self-denial, and you shall bring an offering to the Lord. Now, the last words over here, it says over here, v'hikrabtem ishet ladonai. We should bring an offering to the Lord. Realize that in the times of the Torah, there were offerings that were prescribed on the different festivals and the different occasions throughout the year, and even daily offerings that were supposed to be brought in the morning and then sometimes in the afternoon as well. But when we had a special time, For example, Shabbat, or any of the festivals in the Torah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Shmini Atzeret, or here for the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, an additional offering, a Musaf offering, was required. So that's why we have Musaf services on our Shabbat mornings and also on our festival and high holiday mornings. Because in our tradition, we no longer have the sacrifices of the temple. Rather, we have what's called Avodat Halev, service of the heart, where we bring forward our prayers, our pleadings, our yearnings to God. And we have an additional prayer, an additional Amidah to do that on our special days. Okay? So we said Shabbat, Shabbaton. So what makes Yom Kippur a Sabbath of Sabbaths? Well, let's talk about Shabbat for a second. What are we supposed to do on Shabbat? We're supposed to not create. We're supposed to not think of all the things that we don't have and not supposed to want more. We're supposed to appreciate life around us. And think about this. If we have on Yom Kippur, the day that we are confessing all of our sins, how much more so is that a Sabbath for us? Because that burden of everything that we have done wrong, of how we have failed, of how we have wronged our relationship with ourselves and our God and our family, that carries a lot of weight. And on Yom Kippur, if we can confess for what we've done, if we can assess our souls and try to be better, even if we're not perfect, we're not going to be perfect. In fact, like I said last time, we have confessionals every day for our Tachanun service in the mornings and in the afternoons. If we're not perfect every day, okay, that's part of human nature, but we strive to be a little bit better. So on Yom Kippur, if we can take that burden off of us and come clean with our own souls and with God, that's a Shabbat Shabbaton. Truly being free from that extra burden of weight that we carry without telling anyone else. This is between us and this is between God. And that's why I like to see the word atonement as at-one-ment. Yom Kippur is the day of atonement, or being forgiven for your sins, but it's also a day of at-one-ment. We gather together. We are all assembled in our sanctuary, and now in the post-COVID era, in our own homes, joining together virtually. We're all joining together, but we are also standing individually before God. This is a very personal day. This is a day for us to come clean, for us to have our own relationship with God, and to really have that at-one-ment, just being at one with yourself, at one with your Creator, and at one within your community. So I really love that reference to at-one-ment in addition to atonement. So now I want to spend a little bit of time discussing what are some of the special prayers and liturgy that's found over the course of the Yom Kippur service. Okay? We have, when we're looking for something special, as I mentioned last class, a very wonderful place to search to find what we're looking for, and that's called the Kedushat Hayom. And remember, Kedushat Hayom is the sanctification of the day. It's that fourth section of our 7-sectioned Amidah, where no matter what the day or the time, we are going to find the special liturgy related to that day or that time of the year. So on Yom Kippur, the fourth section, Kedushat Hayom, will share a lot of liturgy with what we have on Rosh Hashanah, the Uvcheins, okay, the therefores, the you chose us, holiness, granting God the kingdom, the kingship of the high holidays. But we also have a special prayer for the forgiveness of sins. And this is kind of like the Chatimah. This is the signature. This is the closing prayer of the fourth section of the Yom Kippur Amidah, the Kedushat Hayom. And it goes like this. Eloheinu v'Elokei Avotenu mechol la'avonotenu b'yom ha'kippurim ha'zeh. Our God and God of our fathers, ancestors, forgive our iniquities on this day of atonement. Blot out and remove our transgressions and sins from before your eyes. As it is said, I alone am he who blots out your transgressions for my own sake, and your sins I will not recall. So remember over here, we have the Sefer HaZichronot, the Book of Remembrances opening, is open over here. We want God to not remember the things that we did wrong. We want God to remember what we have done right. And it is said, I have swept away like a thick cloud your transgressions, like a mist, your sins. Return to me, for I have redeemed you. And it is said, for on this day, Ki vayom hazeh yechaper alechem letaher etchem mikol chatotechem lifnei Adonai titaru. For on this day he will make atonement for you to cleanse you from all your sins. Before Adonai, you will be cleansed. And then the next paragraph, this is similar in function to the Retzeh prayer that we have, the find favor on Shabbat mornings. Our God and God of our ancestors, sanctify us with your commandments and give us your share in your Torah. Satisfy us from your goodness and gladden us with your deliverance. And purify our hearts to serve you in truth, for you are the pardoner of Israel and the forgiver of the tribes of Yeshurun in every generation. And besides you, we have no king who forgives and pardons, only you. And now here's the Chatima, where we see the Baruch Atah Adonai. The text that follows it is going to be a summary of the prayer. So we have Baruch Atah Adonai, blessed are you, King, who forgives and pardons our iniquities and the iniquities of his people, the house of Israel, and who removes our trespasses each year. Melech al kol haaretz, right? Melech al kol haaretz, mekadesh Yisrael, king over the whole earth, and sanctifier of Israel, B'yom HaKippurim, in the day of atonement. Amen. And we're done with that section. Okay? Another wonderful section that we have is the El Melech Yoshev, going into the 13 attributes of mercy. Adonai, Adonai. El Melech Yoshev al Kisei Rachamim Mitnaheg B'chasidut. Almighty King who sits on the throne of mercy, governs with kindness, forgives the iniquity of his people. He removes their sins one by one, increasing forgiveness to sinners and pardon to transgressors, acting righteously with all who are flesh and spirit. Not according to their wickedness does he repay them. Almighty, you instructed us to recite the 13 divine attributes and remember us this day the covenant of the 13 divine attributes, as you made them known to the humble Moses of old, as it is written, and Adonai descended in the cloud and stood with him there and proclaimed the name of Adonai. And then the quote right there from Exodus, Vayavor Adonai al panav vayikra Adonai Adonai el rachum v'chanun erech apayim v'rav chesed v'emet notzer chesed la'alafim nosei avon v'fesha v'chata'a v'nakeh. Adonai Adonai, Almighty, merciful, gracious, slow to anger, and abundant in kindness and truth, keeper of kindness for thousands of generations, endurer of iniquity and transgression and sin, and acquitter of those who repent, and pardon our iniquity and our sin, and take us for your inheritance. So this is similar to what we had on Rosh Hashanah during the Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot services. Remember, we had proof texts. How do we know that God is the forgiver of iniquity and sin and does not remember our wickedness? Because it says there, right there in Exodus, okay, that God has these 13 attributes of mercy, okay? The Shlosh Midot, the 13 attributes. So that's what we use as the proof text to know that we will be forgiven before God. And one of my favorite musical settings is one that we do here at Sinai Temple, the El Melech Yoshev by Zavel Zilberts. That is the powerful El Melech Yoshev by Zavo Zubrutz that brings us into the 13 attributes of mercy. And this year, the year that we just witnessed, which was 2018, I believe this was our Slichot service. We were joined by Dr. Noreen Green and the AJU choir. Now, on to more special liturgy for Yom Kippur. The main, the core, the meat and potatoes of Yom Kippur is the confessional. To be forgiven, you need to confess. So in all of the services for Yom Kippur, we have a special section of liturgy, usually after the Amidah, called the Vidui. This is the confessional. This is actually the same term that's used for an end-of-life confessional, a Vidui, asking for God to forgive us of our sins before we pass away. And if we are not able to do that, then it can be recited on our behalf as well. And of course, the Shema is included at the end-of-life confessional, because our tradition teaches that the first words we're supposed to recite and the last words we're supposed to recite when we wake up from birth and when we pass away are the Shema. And that is even more specific for our morning prayers too. The first words we're supposed to say when we wake up are the Shema, and the last words before we go to bed are the Shema as well. So that's why we have the Shema in the morning service and in the evening service, but not in the afternoon service. Just a fun fact there. So the Vidui comes in 3 different sections. And what I want to point out about the Vidui is something that you probably already know, is that it doesn't say Chatati, Pashati, Aviti. It doesn't say like, Al chet shechatati lefanecha. It doesn't say that for the sin that I sinned against you. This says for the sin that we sinned against you. That this is plural. And that's one of the beauty of communal prayer, where we're all standing, as I mentioned before, by ourselves in the presence of the divine, but we're all together in a community, knowing that we are all in the same boat, that we all have missed the mark in some way. And you're reading through some of the list of sins, and you're like, my goodness, I didn't do that. Well, maybe someone next to you did. Maybe they're going through something that you didn't. Maybe you didn't realize that you did that sin. No one is perfect, but that's why we get a whole litany of sins, to make sure that we are covered and to know that we are going through this process of teshuvah, of repentance, of confession together as a community. So, Ki anu amecha is the introduction, and we have a really wonderful melody that we do at Sinai Temple by Carl Erstein, and I will keep you hanging and have you wait until we're actually in services to have you listen to that one. But the Ki anu amecha introduces this section of the Vidui, the confessional. For we are your people and you are our God. We are your children and you are our Father. We are your servants and you are our master. We are your congregation and you are our portion. We are your inheritance and you are our destiny. We are your flock, and you are our shepherd. We are your vineyard, and you are our keeper. We are your work, and you are our creator. We are your dear ones, and you are our beloved. We are your treasure, and you are our God. We are your people, and you are our king. We are your distinguished ones, and you are our distinction. Very beautiful text, very poetic, very, very intimate, discussing with God. Well, just before we're about to confess our deepest mistakes, we have this love, we have this relationship, this back and forth relationship and connection between creator and creation. Okay, and then we have the shorter confessional, and this is the so we have the Ashamnu, Bagadnu. Oops, looks like I got a little out of order here. There it is. Ashamnu, Bagadnu, Gazalnu, Dibarnu, Dofi. And you'll oftentimes see in the Machzor an acrostic in English. So for example, we abuse, we betray, we are cruel, we destroy, we embitter, we falsify, we gossip, so on and so forth, A to Z. But here is the translation, traditional translation of Ashamnu. We have trespassed against God and man, and we are devastated by our guilt. We have betrayed God and man. We have been ungrateful for the good done to us. We have stolen, we have slandered, we have caused others to sin. We have caused others to commit sins for which they are called Resha'im, wicked. We have sinned with malicious intent. We have forcibly taken others' possessions, even though we paid for them. We have added falsehood upon falsehood. We have joined with evil individuals or groups. We have given harmful advice. We have deceived, we have mocked, we have rebelled against God and his Torah. We have caused God to be angry with us. We have turned away from God's Torah. We have sinned deliberately. We have been negligent in our performance of the commandments. We have caused our friends grief. We have been stiff-necked, refusing to admit that our suffering is caused by our own sins. We have committed sins for which we are called Rasha, raising a hand to hit someone. We have committed sins which are the result of moral corruption. We have committed sins which the Torah refers to as abominations. We have gone astray. We have led others astray. The short confession, the Ashamnu Bagadnu, and this is the one we have the melody and some interesting note about the nusach or melody. It's not exactly the quote unquote tune you would imagine to say, we are terrible, we are sinners, we did wrong. It's not exactly the melody that you would associate with a confessional. But that's
where the melody come from?
It's Mi Sinai. That's a very good question, Jerry. So a lot of our melodies that we have, especially in the high holidays, are Mi Sinai. It's called the Mishaberach, the Slicha mode. It's the Slicha mode, which is the mode of asking for forgiveness, and it has this major modality, which, while there isn't any specific answer on paper, we can kind of infer that there's some sort of optimism in here too, that yes, we have done these things, but there's maybe optimism that we can do better in the future. Jerry?
By Mi Sinai, I know that means from Sinai. Do the non-Ashkenazi, like the Sephardi communities, have similar melodies to Mi Sinai melodies, or no?
So each community will have their own sacred melodies, but when I'm talking about our melodies and stuff too, I am referring only to the Ashkenazic tradition. In fact, it's a conversation I had yesterday. I'm now a professor of cantorial and liturgical studies at the AJR California, Academy for Jewish Religion, California, my alma mater. And I was saying this to our students there too, that you guys are in cantorial school, but you're really in Ashkenazic cantorial school. Like, I can't train you to be a Sephardic cantor, a Yemenite cantor, a Moroccan cantor, a Mizrahi cantor, a Persian cantor. Everyone has their own sacred melodies. We have our specific melodies and nusachot and traditions and Mi Sinai tunes for our tradition. And when we say Mi Sinai, I wish I could say that this is the melody that Moses was singing coming down Mount Sinai. Maybe. We don't even know what the melody sounded like in the ancient temple, but we know that music was a central role in the temple. So we can infer, maybe it sounded like Gregorian chant because that's where the early Christians heard that music. We don't know. But I would argue that cantillation, the way that we chant our holy texts, are as close as possible that we can get to some original sense of original Jewish music. And a lot of the nusach that we have, the melodies and modes, of our sacred services are based off of the cantillation symbols as well. So when we say Mi Sinai, the reality is the melody is probably only about 800 or 1,000 years old. Only, very, very young in Jewish tradition. So coming from the birthplace of Ashkenaz in Central Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. Okay? All right. Now we have the longer confessional, the Al Chetz. This is a really long list of everything that we did wrong. So I'm not going to go through all of them. You can see we've sinned. For the sin we've committed with you under compulsion and willingly, for the sin we've committed before you inadvertently, openly and secretly, sexual immorality, through misuse of power or speech, with knowledge and with deceit, by joining in lewd gathering, by insufficient respect for parents and teachers, by desecrating the divine name, and so on. There's plenty to be sinful here, plenty to be to need to ask forgiveness for. By being stiff-necked, stubborn. Raise your hand if you've been stiff-necked or stubborn. I'll raise my hand. We've all done this, okay? We're not going to ask who's done what and who hasn't done what, but the whole point is that it takes reviewing a litany of sins to realize, yes, I have done this. Yes, I have missed the mark. This is not who I've needed to be, and this is how I can do better. Okay? So a few other special moments of Yom Kippur will be the Yizkor service. And what I really love about Yizkor, and Rabbi Wolpe gave a beautiful sermon about Yizkor on one of the services. I can't remember the holiday, I can't remember the year. Rabbi Wolpe gives so many brilliant sermons. We say, a Yizkor service is a memorial prayer, but it's really not a memorial, it's Yizkor. May he remember, may God remember. We, of course, remember our loved ones, but we are asking for God to remember our loved ones during the holy days, during the sacred times of our year. So the Yizkor service is recited 4 times a year, once on Yom Kippur, and then the next one comes very soon after on Shmini Atzeret, and then it's also recited on the last day of Passover, on the 8th day of Passover, and then on the 2nd day of Shavuot as well. So 4 times through the year we have the Yizkor service. But there's plenty of time to be in shul. There's plenty of time to have all sorts of prayers and everything. And this is going to be very interesting that this year will be the first time where we're not going to have congregants in the shul for the entire day of Yom Kippur. It's going to feel very strange. We're having abridged Yom Kippur services due to the pandemic. We're going to start at 9 a.m. and then conclude by 1 p.m. And then everyone's going to be asked to leave the building so we can have everything cleaned up and sanitized, and then everyone can return for Mincha at, I believe, 4:30. Don't quote me on that. And then we have Ne'ilah, I think, at 6 p.m., which with the shofar blowing at 7:30 p.m. That sound about right, Jay? You have a better memory than I do. I'll put you on the spot.
I know. I saw that the end is set for 7:30.
All right, so that sounds.
You can work backwards from that. That
sounds about right. So that's gonna be our schedule, and during that 3.5 hour break, quote unquote, during Yom Kippur, the clergy will be offering study sessions via Zoom, to be determined. So what is referred to as the core part of the Yom Kippur Musaf service is a two-part prayer service, starting with martyrology and then having the avoda service. And this is really the core of the Yom Kippur service. And in all of the years, most people have already gone home because we have Yom Kippur morning, which would normally start at 9 and would conclude, or the first part of it would conclude with Rabbi's sermon and the Yizkor around 1 o'clock, 1:15. And then for some reason, everyone is leaving and vacating. And then for the core part of the service, the martyrology and avoda service, we only had, a couple hundred people there. The other 4,500 left the building. But martyrology is it's a tough service. This is Eila Ez Kera, that we remember these things. This talks about the brutality and the torture that many of our martyrs and our rabbis encountered over the course of Jewish history. We read their stories in graphic detail, and modern stories have been added as well to the text of the martyrology service. And then we have the Avoda service. And the Avoda service is really sacred. This is a retelling of what the holiest official in Judaism, the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, did on the holiest day of the year, on Yom Kippur, the Avoda service. V'cha chaya omer, Ana Hashem chatati aviti pashati lefanecha ani uveiti. And here we have the confessional of the high priest in the singular. And this was his confession. I beg of you, Hashem, I have sinned, acted wickedly, and rebelled against you. I and my household, I beg of you, with your name, atone the sins, iniquities, and rebellion that I have sinned, acted wickedly, and rebelled against you. I and my household, as it is written in the Torah of Moses, your servant, from the mouth of your glory, for on this day he will make atonement for you to cleanse you from all of your sins before Adonai. Veha Kohanim. And now we have the part of the service where we fall korim. We actually prostrate ourselves fully to the floor. And the priests and the people who were standing in the temple courtyard, when they heard the glorious and awesome name of God, which was only recited one time of year on Yom Kippur, it's the ineffable divine name. Still, we don't know how to pronounce this divine name. We haven't heard the divine name, but God's name, specific name, would be recited on Yom Kippur. It would be pronounced from the mouth of the high priest with holiness and with purity. They bowed, prostrated themselves, offered thanks, and fell on their faces and said, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Leolam Va'ed. Blessed is his name, his glorious kingdom, forever and ever. Really beautiful liturgy. And I encourage you, while you're at home or while you're in shul, go through. And even though some of the liturgy will be, or a lot of the liturgy will be skipped or will be abbreviated, I encourage you to flip through the machzor and to really put yourself in the presence of this holy time, in this holy space. Now, what would a cantor say is a very important prayer on Yom Kippur? Any guesses? Yes, you all said it.
Havienu?
We have a Max Healthman fan. Havienu. I love Havienu, but Kol Nidre. Anyone heard of that prayer? Yeah, I've heard it a couple times. I've sung it a couple times. It's actually amazing because, growing up, hearing my cantor chant it, it's held in such like a sacred place of, wow, like I wonder if I'll be able to do that one day. And now that I get to do it every year, it's just such an honor and a blessing. And I know that people who have had a chance to do it can feel that sacred holiness. I mean, I feel not only my teacher when I'm chanting, or my many teachers I've had when I'm chanting the Kol Nidre, but I imagine their teachers and the teachers before them, and the cantors that have existed for generations and generations. So Kol Nidre, all vows. This text
I've gotten to accompany the cello version.
The cello version?
Yeah.
The Bruch.
I played the piano, and I had a congregant who was a cellist, and I also, on one memorable occasion, accompanied a violinist who did a violin version.
There's nothing better than Kol Nidre. Nothing better. Okay, but we're all talking about the melody, right? But what about the words? Well, it's written in Aramaic, which was the vernacular of the Jews at the time. Our vernacular today obviously is English, but for many of our ancestors, the vernacular was Yiddish or Farsi. But it's a dry legal formula. Really not much meat and potatoes there. It's recited at the beginning of the evening service. And as we know, the entire evening service is actually referred to as Kol Nidre because of this prayer's central role in the Yom Kippur service. And the formula of Kol Nidre, when we look at it, it proactively annuls or retroactively, depending on the text. Either may all of the sins that we are about to promise from this Kol Nidre to next Kol Nidre, or from the previous Kol Nidre to this Kol Nidre. There's two different versions. And he annuls personal or religious oaths or prohibitions made upon oneself to God for next year or the previous year, so as to preemptively avoid the sin of breaking vows made to God which cannot be or are not upheld. So that's the summary of Kol Nidre. It is a legal formula disavowing all of the vows that we have made in the past year, or will make in the next year, as I said, depending on the text, all the many different ways of describing the different promises that we can keep. Now, one thing that's
Last question.
Yeah,
so
Jerry.
I know that in Reform movement traditionally and in other places, Kol Nidre is actually really controversial. I read it; it sounds, it sounds non-offensive to me. I mean, maybe about the versions that have about the sins in the future, which I don't think we have in our mock store. But why is it that, like, I know that, say, some Reform congregations historically, not today, took Kol Nidre even out of the service. You won't find it in the Union Prayer Book, for example.
Well, I think the answer is right here on this slide. I'm glad you brought it up, because many non-Jews would look at this text and be like, ha, see, you can't trust Jews. They don't keep their promises. It says right here, okay? Any of the vows that they're going to make, they're not really vows. Any of the promises are not really promises, okay? And by the way, in our Machzor, it says from this Yom Kippur to the next. So we are referring to future vows. But in some of the other Machzorim, it's going to be for past vows. So yeah, non-Jews would look at this text and be like, there you go. It's written right there in their holiest part of the service on the holiest day of the year, that all the vows that they are going to make really aren't vows, okay? And they shouldn't be considered vows. And the renunciations should not be considered renunciations, and promises shall not be considered promises. But we have to realize that this Kol Nidre prayer does not affect vows or oaths made between Adam lechavero. There's bein Adam lemakom, the relationship between man and his or her creator, and there's bein Adam lechavero, between one man and another, between two human beings. So the Kol Nidre does not affect vows or oaths made between people. Rather, all nafshatana, the vows of our own vows, personal and to God. And so I said this prayer has been used by non-Jews as a basis for asserting that an oath taken by a Jew may not be trusted, but fail to recognize. They fail to recognize that these are only personal vows to God. Okay? So I think that's part of the answer to the question, that if the controversy of seeing this as potentially, damning against the Jewish people, when in reality it's just a misrepresentation and a misreading of our tradition. So it's a legal document annulling vows that were made without our full heart. And this refers to the expulsion 1492 of our Sephardic friends from the Iberian Peninsula, Spain, and Portugal. Conversos and Moranos, these were Jews who were under duress, who basically were given three options, okay, by King Isabel and Ferdinand, I believe. They were given three options, okay? Convert, leave, or die. Those were basically your three options if you were Jewish in the Spanish kingdom. So what did some Jews do? They became conversos, where they took on the promise to renounce their Jewish faith and become practicing Christians. But on Kol Nidre, they'd be able to say, well, I didn't actually really mean that, because I am still faithful to my tradition.
Did the text come from that day and it wasn't before?
Sorry?
The text that you're referring to is the only from the late 1400s?
No, Kol Nidre is older. The Kol Nidre text was used.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
Exactly. So the Kol Nidre was used for this purpose as well, not only for disavowing personal vows made between God, but also vows that were made under duress, where they couldn't actually, be made with a full heart.
No, but the question I had is, did these verses come before the conversos and was used for the conversos, or was it written because of the conversos?
No, these came before.
Okay.
Yes. Kol Nidre is older than the 15th century. So let's talk about the exciting part. No one knows the text. Can anyone recite the text of Kol Nidre for me? Anyone? No? I didn't think so. How about the melody? Can anyone hum like a few lines of the Kol Nidre? Probably everyone, right? Not going to ask you to do now. But that's the whole point, is that the melody is what sticks with us. The melody is what is sacred. The melody is what is connecting us to our tradition. So the cantor traditionally will chant the Kol Nidre passage 3 times in varying degrees of intensities, from pianissimo, super quiet, to fortissimo, louder and louder and louder, to really wake up our souls, to wake us up to this holiest day of the year, to have God start paying attention to us, to listen to us, and also to make sure that a latecomer isn't going to miss out on hearing it. And that's true for us too. You know, we have the Kol Nidre service. We start at 6 p.m. We start a little bit late because we know that people are not going to arrive at the beginning, and the service starts with an assembly, gathering the congregation together, making it a lawful assembly, and then going right into Kol Nidre, the traditional text of Kol Nidre 3 times. So since it's right there at the beginning of the service, do it a few times to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear it at least once. So as we mentioned before, we've used this term Mi Sinai, a Mi Sinai melody, which would be argued as a melody that's been unchanged since Moses climbed down the mountain. In reality, the melody is most likely 1,000 years old. And a little bit of a proof text for this, about 400 years ago, in the early 17th century, Rabbi Mordechai Jaffe of Prague, known as the Levush, mentioned that all cantors knew a set melody, which was traditional for Kol Nidre. Okay? So even 400 years ago, there was a set melody that all cantors were very familiar with. Where does this melody come from? It's an oral tradition, just like the Mishnah and the Talmud were oral law before they were finally written down. This was passed from generation to generation, from teacher to student, to cantor to cantor to cantor, an unbroken chain of tradition. On the other hand, if you go to any 2 synagogues in the world, you're never going to hear exactly the same melody, note for note. Okay? Why? Because each cantor and each composer is going to add his or her own flavor and a little bit of interpretation to the melody of Kol Nidre, while still being faithful to the nusach, being faithful to the motifs, the musical motifs and moves and runs that make Kol Nidre into Kol Nidre. So there are hundreds of recordings that you can find of Kol Nidre. It's one of the beautiful things about YouTube. You can go on YouTube, type in Kol Nidre, and you will have literally hundreds of cantors chanting Kol Nidre, and it's so wonderful. So to help you prepare, I encourage you to do your own research, to listen to a few recordings. But for our class, I'm going to highlight 3 recordings, 3 musical interpretations of Kol Nidre. First, by the one, the only, the cantor of cantors, Cantor, Yosela Rosenblatt, born in 1882, died in 1933. He's considered the greatest cantor of all time. Can you believe that? The greatest cantor of all time. Was he? Could be. But it's kind of unfair because no one before his generation gets skin in the game. Why? Because there was no recordings. It's only with his generation, the very, very late 1890s and early 1900s, where the phonograph became a household object, and he was able to literally sell millions of records. I don't remember the exact date, but I think it was 1914 or 15 when the Titanic sank. Does anyone have a better memory than me? 16, 17, somewhere in the 19 teens, right?
It's way earlier than that, like 10 or 11. It's before World War One.
Okay, so when the Titanic sank, Cantor Yosela Rosenblatt created a record, an El Maleh Rachamim, for the victims of the Titanic. You can hear it on YouTube. He's got an El Maleh Rachamim, a memorial prayer for those who perished in the sinking of the Titanic. And it sold millions of copies because people who were not able to be in shul live, they now have the ability to do what we take for granted, to pull up a song, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Music, whatever you want to do, and just listen to it immediately. And now to even pull up a video, to have all these things at our resource, this is all modern miracles of technology. But the phonograph started it all. It enabled cantors to record their voices and sell the records, and to have their voices be heard not just in their own kehillah, not just in their own community. So here's Josela Rosenblatt singing Kol Nidre. The Josela Rosenblatt. None like him. On to the next one. The Jazz Singer. Such an iconic film. It's actually the first talkie. Now, what a talkie means is what we take for granted as well. In other words, having actors being able to talk to each other and we hear their dialogue, being able to hear live music recorded in the background of the movie. Before this, remember, there were only silent films. Charlie Chaplin, early Hollywood. So before 1927, that was the only way to enjoy films. And then along comes The Jazz Singer, the first talking film of all time. And what's it the story of? It's the story of a cantor's son who has a conflict. He wants to make it big in Hollywood. He wants to be a jazz singer. But he constantly has the melody of Kol Nidre pulling at his heartstrings. And at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen it, it came out almost 100 years ago, so there's no excuse if you haven't seen it yet. Spoiler alert, he's about to have a concert on the stage. It's his debut night, but his father, the cantor, falls ill. And he has a conflict. It's Yom Kippur. And the synagogue needs a cantor to sing Kol Nidre. And he hasn't sung Kol Nidre in years. He hasn't done it since he was a little boy. But it finally goes to the next scene, and the show is canceled. There will be no show tonight, because the jazz singer is in shul singing Kol Nidre. I love that. One of the final scenes in the movie, the father cantor passes away knowing that they have their son back. And it's the jazz singer who is singing to his God. And then last but not least, not for self-promotion, rather for nostalgia. For 2 years ago, when life was so different. Can you imagine? 2 years ago, when we were standing in this sanctuary for Kol Nidre, that we would be where we are today in a very changed world. Yet, last year in a completely virtual service, and this year in a hybrid service, the music remains. Kol Nidre remains. The text remains. The tradition remains. We've created a legal assembly every year at Sinai Temple since our founding over 120 years ago. And we'll do so again in just a few short weeks. The second Kol Nidre that we do at Sinai Temple by Paul Discount, 2019. Kol Nidre at Sinai Temple. And yes, right in the middle of this, I realized I put the Rusotto version. So this is not by Paul Discount, but by Henry Rusotto. And this composition is also from the turn of the century, probably like late 1890s, early 1900s as well. And that, my friends, is our class. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing in the liturgy of the High Holidays. And we hope to see you again very soon.